Hello and welcome to our monthly product overview series. This month I'm going to be re-reviewing Zoho Campaigns. We last did a full product overview about 2 years ago. I'm going to dive in. There haven't been too many changes, but it's about that time that we revisit the product, especially with Marketing Automation's new release last year. And a lot of people wondering if I should switch to Marketing Automation or stay on Zoho Campaigns. Both are excellent products. At the moment, if you need to do account-based marketing, you're going to want to stay on Zoho Campaigns, but this feature is coming soon to Marketing Automation. But there are some big changes I hear in the near future coming to Zoho Campaigns, some updates we've all been waiting for, and we will be sure to drop videos on all of these updates as soon as they come out. But for now, let's look at Zoho Campaigns as it is in its current state. So taking a look at the agenda, I'm going to break this down into different sections. Feel free to skip ahead to whatever section you want to learn more about, or if you want more in-depth training, we do have a full training course on Zoho Campaigns. So looking at the agenda, first thing we're going to cover is the product overview and settings. So we'll go through the sidebar and then go through all of the settings. Next, I'll dive into topic management. After that, we'll look at the CRM integration and setting up the sync to the different modules. Then we'll take a look at segments and lists and go over the differences between the two. After that, I'll show you how to assign a topic to a segment. Then we'll go ahead and look at sending your first campaign. Then we'll go over some generic workflow automations. And then lastly, if you're new to Zoho Campaigns or you're thinking about switching from another platform to Zoho Campaigns, I'll go over some general best practices for migration tips to help you get started. So let's go ahead and dive into the product overview and settings. All right, so let's dive into the product overview and settings. But before I do, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. So I first want to start, before I dive in, it's a common thing where people are like, I use Zoho One. Well, we're on Zoho One right now. There's two ways that you can view the product. The first is typing in campaigns.zoho.com. The other is going to one.zoho.com and choosing Zoho Campaigns from the product. In this overview, I'm going to do it from the campaign side. However, I just want to point out it is pretty much identical. Everything is just up here on the top instead of over here on the left. So whether you're in Zoho One or you're in Campaigns, they're both the same. So let's go ahead and get started. First view we have over here is the dashboard. This is a demo account, so there's no information in here yet, but here you can go ahead and customize your dashboard and look at your analytics of the sent campaigns. Next, we have the campaigns module. From here, we can go ahead and send email campaigns or SMS campaigns. By simply clicking in, you can go ahead and create your various email campaigns. These are ones that are going to be one-offs that you're going to be sending out to your clients or recipients. Next, we have our contacts module. Here you can view all contacts. You can go ahead and manage your list. You can go ahead and manage your topics. You can set up your syncs. You can go ahead and configure your segments. You can go ahead and set up sign-up forms. Review your contact scoring rules. And then lastly, apply contact tags. Next, we have our automations. Here we can go ahead and create our workflows. These will be our drip campaigns and various marketing journeys. Next, if you're running e-commerce, you can go ahead and connect e-commerce to WooCommerce, Shopify, and Zoho Commerce. Next, if you want to go ahead and view your templates or have a library of images and files to share with everyone, that's going to be creating the documents. You have your templates all within your library and your images and attachments. And then lastly, we have our reports where we can go ahead and view sent campaigns, look at campaign-based reporting, list-based reporting, and then lastly, see how our SMS email marketing efforts did. Next, let's go ahead and dive into the settings. So I'm going to spend a bit more time on this because everything I just covered briefly over here, I'm going to go into more depth here shortly. So here you can go ahead and set up a general profile. We can go ahead and just look at our country region and set up first, last name. Next, we have company details. Similar to profile, you can just add a little bit more information here about your company. Next, we have notifications. So inside of notifications, you can go ahead and turn on your various email reports based on your marketing efforts. You can go ahead and set up your subscription and manage your subscription back here. So if you wanted to upgrade your plan, you can do so back here to enable more contacts. Remember, it's about 5,000 contacts per Zoho One user. So if you need, if you only have 10 users on your team and you need to reach 1 million people, you're going to need to reach out to Zoho to upgrade your plan so you can increase your contact limit. If you're in the EU, we can go ahead and turn on GDPR. Or if you need HIPAA compliance, you can also go ahead and turn on and manage your HIPAA settings back here. Next, we can go ahead and manage our opt-in. So if we need double opt-in, we can go ahead and set that up back here as well. For US-based clients, so this is for US-based users. This isn't so much an enforced policy yet. Next, we can go ahead and customize our header and footer. However, this has changed. I'll go over that later in the campaign builder. You just now have the default. You can go ahead and configure and customize your sign-up pages and emails. I would highly recommend, if you're new to Zoho campaigns, that you go through these and you come in, because what you see right now is what you're going to receive, what the client's going to receive. So it's going to say brand name, brand description. So you're definitely going to want to come through and go through all of these sign-up pages and emails and configure them to your brand. Next, you can go ahead and view your custom fields. You can view your merge tags. This has all been simplified, so it automatically pulls it now. So back in the day, it was more of a manual process. But if you're curious what the merge tag is, you can go ahead and see it back here. We've got some basic user role, users and permissions back here. So we can go ahead and switch now and go ahead and turn on the new users and permissions. And as you can see, it's just very, very generic. And then now we've got roles and privileges. We have the one user, and we can go ahead and see the different roles and privileges down here. And we can go ahead and add roles and adjust what they can and cannot do. And same with workspaces. If you want to create a workspace for your organization, maybe you have, split departments working one with sales, one with marketing, and you want to keep them siloed and not have their material cross, you can go ahead and set up workspaces back here. Next, you got data administration. You can go ahead and do your audit logs back here. We've got campaign policies, so you can set email limits for the day, set some privacy settings. We can set campaign tracking, content approval, and export policy. These are all pretty straightforward. Next, we have app integrations. So this is also going to be in the sync settings, but you can go ahead and look at all of the various apps that you can integrate with Zoho campaigns. And if we go back to settings, we can go ahead and also look at the marketplace apps, which there's Google, Office 365, and WordPress. And then lastly, integration platforms. Maybe you need to make a custom connection. You have access to both Zoho Flow and Zapier to use a webhook. Next, deliverability. This is going to be important. This is where you're going to manage your senders. And you're going to want to make sure you have your SPF and DKIM set up. And if you don't know how to set that up, you can simply come in here and share instructions with your IT person, whoever set up your website or your mailing servers. They're going to know how to do this. I also have written a couple blogs over on Zenatta on SPF and DKIM, as well as setting up DMARC, which isn't mentioned in here, but you're also going to want to set up DMARC to really get that authentication going and your emails going out. You can set up custom return pass once your domain has been authenticated, and imprint details if you wanted to leave an imprint as well. And then wrapping up the settings, we also have the developer space. Here we can go ahead and look at APIs. And lastly, set up some webhooks if we wanted to create a campaign webhook or a contact webhook. I'm not going to go into this, is a little bit more complicated. I'm not going to go into these on this product overview, but just know if you're a developer, they all exist back here. Next, let's go ahead and jump into topic management. There's a lot of different features that are often over-explained or made kind of confusing with segmentation and topic management. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. Topics are just allowing your users to have an extra way to opt in or opt out of your content. So let's say I've been receiving a newsletter for months and I only want to see promotions from you from now on, or vice versa. Rather than just completely unsubscribing, I can go ahead and just opt out of the topic. Now, some things to keep in mind: at the moment, there's no way to really export this topic list. So you can't see which users are opted in or opted out to the topics. You can simply see when you go to send an email out, you can go ahead and choose a segment, which we'll get into later on. And you can go ahead and see, well, I've got 4,000 people in this segment, but it's only going to 3,500. And if you clicked force them to the topic again, it's essentially reassigning them to this topic. Then you'd see 4,000 again, unless they've been bounced or opted out completely. So this is essentially topics in a nutshell. Let's go ahead and take a quick look. So if we go to contacts here and we go to topic management, or manage topics, I should say, here we can go ahead and see we have two. Now, I want to stop you before you go ahead and add and edit this section. One important thing to keep in mind is that by default, it's just going to say marketing. And if it's only marketing, that means when a user goes to unsubscribe, they're just going to be able to unsubscribe completely and not be able to manage their topics. For a lot of organizations, this is okay. A lot of us don't have multiple different types of email content that we're sending out, which is completely fine. If that's you, I would just leave it as marketing as is and not touch this topic management section. Now, however, if you are going to have multiple products and multiple groups, you can go ahead and group products under multiple topics here. You also are going to want to, in the settings section I just covered, when you can go ahead and in the back end change things of how things appear. People are going to be able to see this verbatim of what you have here. So you want it to be clear of what they're opting in or opting out of. I mean, marketing is, you can call it general promotions, but I probably wouldn't call it marketing. Call it like product promotions or whatever you're trying to sell. So that's topic management in a nutshell. Extremely simple. There's not much to it. When we get into workflows, I'm going to show you a quick way to assign everyone to one topic. Let's go ahead and jump into the next section. All right, so next, let's go into one of the key things we're going to want to set up initially, and that's going to be the sync to Zoho CRM. So what you're going to do is go back over the contacts module, or if you're using the Zoho one, it's going to be on the top here, and you click contacts, and it'll be the same drop-down menu that we're seeing here. So we're going to go to contacts and sync services. And we're going to go ahead and choose the application that we want to sync to. In this case, it's going to be Zoho CRM, but if you're using Biggin, it's going to be quite similar. Just associate a new account with Biggin. So let's go ahead and sync our modules here. And as you can see, for some of us, if you were on the old sync, you'll see these here. You can go ahead and remove these for the most part, because now everything is just pulling in directly from the CRM. So we have our contacts, and there's two types of syncs we can set up. We can go ahead and set up our contacts or leads or a custom module. So by default, leads and contacts, we're generally going to want to have both set up. And we're going to choose a mailing list. I usually create a mailing list just saying all leads. And this is just going to apply everyone to a mailing list, which later on, as they convert to a contact, maybe you want to separate leads from contacts, vice versa. You can go ahead and use this as an extra layer to do so. Generally speaking, we're always going to be choosing marketing. A lot of your non-marketing content is going to be done directly out of CRM, unless for whatever reason you have an extremely large list going out daily for non-marketing content, then you might also want to run that inside of Zoho campaigns. And now here we can go ahead and apply a topic. So let's say by default, everyone coming into our systems has applied to marketing. So by now we can go ahead and say every single lead coming in, the form on our website says they opted into marketing content and they're going to receive that content regardless. And by submitting the form, they agree to this, and we can go ahead and hit next. And from here, we can go ahead and choose the different fields we want to have integrated with Zoho campaigns. So much like a custom view inside of Zoho CRM, these custom views with the different fields that we're going to segment by, we want to choose all of those fields we might be using for custom views later on to create our segments and add them directly in the back end here to the sync. So here we can go ahead and choose all of the custom fields that we want to have mapped over by simply clicking Map More, choosing the fields, and then going ahead and choosing New Field and Add. Some of these fields already exist, so just be careful in adding these. And naming conventions in the leads and contacts module can be sometimes different, but they are kind of mapped to the same fields. It's not the case in Zoho campaigns. You want to make sure that you're choosing the same fields, especially if they share a lead or contact could be receiving the same email for marketing purposes, but the fields are labeled slightly different in leads and contacts. If you don't have it configured right in the back end, you might end up having to do extra work, creating two different segments to send out the same content because you have two different field labels. And then once you're done, you can go ahead and hit initiate. And then that will go ahead and sync everything over. And for whatever reason, if you feel like your sync isn't, up to date, sometimes it breaks, very seldomly, but sometimes it does. You can come back here and see when the sync was last done. So you can see I just created this now on October 9th, and we can go ahead and come back here and see, making sure everything is syncing properly. If you have an active CRM, this should be a daily, multiple times a day process that you can check back here. So that's going to cover sync services. I'm actually going to dive into one more thing. So I talked earlier about account-based marketing. So the contacts module is actually where you can also sync accounts and deals or opportunities depending on how you have it labeled. You'd simply come back here and you can go ahead and map additional fields. That's all tied directly to the contact module. And then back in the sync history or the sync services section as well, if you need to connect any of your other applications like Zoho Analytics or Creator Desk, you can go ahead, and Zoho CRM isn't the only one. But for most email marketing purposes, I find Zoho CRM, it's good to make that the point of truth and then build everything around the CRM, pulling the data into campaigns and then pushing it back if needed. So that's going to wrap it up for this section. Let's go ahead and take a look at list and segments next. Okay, so now that we've got our sync set up, let's go ahead and dive into list and segments. So I'm going to briefly touch on list real quick, but segments are going to be what we're going to spend most of the time on because they're more important than list, and that's what you're going to be using more often. So a few use cases for list. Lists are going to be static. One of the use cases is just pulling in all of your leads, all of your contacts that are coming in into one master dump list. That way, if you say, if they're a contact, I don't want to mail to any of my contacts, only my leads, you can go ahead and put an exclusion with your contacts, which I'll go over in the next section with campaigns. But you might also have some organizations don't want to pull in their lists that they're purchasing, which I'm not saying you should buy a list. I'm against it. But for those of you that don't want, these 100,000 or 10,000 records inside of your CRM, you might also go ahead and come here and say, hey, I'm going to create a list, and we'll say it's like Zoom info, leads, and let's save this. And then we'd go ahead and import a large number of contacts. You could also create a list just for testing purposes internally. You can hit add new and add yourself to a list, and you go ahead and run yourself through the workflows or the email campaigns just to make sure they're all good before cloning and sending it out. Another use case for lists is you can do a sign-up form. For example, you can have a newsletter page and just have all your newsletter people coming to a list. But really, you would want this to come into the CRM as a hidden field saying newsletter sign-up or newsletter opt-in, fields mapped to the CRM, and then the CRM, that field is mapped to campaigns. And then you're pulling that dynamically with a segment. One other use case for lists, would be like sometimes at the end of a workflow, when we go into the automations here and create our journey here later on in this webinar, what we could do is add a list to the end of a workflow. And this way we know, let's say we want to change the segment later on that it's being mailed to, and we don't want some of the previous people that have already gone through this workflow going again. Well, when they complete the workflow, by adding them to this segment, you could go ahead and, or adding them to this list, I should say, you can go ahead and know that you can set up an exclusion rule later on that these people will not go through the same workflow again. Okay, so now that we've covered lists, let's go ahead and take a look at segments. So what segments are, much like if we go to like the leads module inside the CRM, we can go ahead and see here that we have our different custom views, advertising leads, and this is a demo account, so there's nothing here. But we would have our different criteria that's looking at different fields, and based on those fields, leads that meet the criteria, records that meet the criteria would go ahead and be populated here. Campaigns does the exact same thing. It is looking based on the syncs that we have set up. It is looking at the custom fields and then applying those same contacts using that same kind of logic that you would have with a custom view inside a segment. So we already have one here called lead source, but let's go ahead and set up a common segment that we might be using. So many of us have newsletters, so we could call this newsletter newsletter. And then we would need the field newsletter. Now, I don't have that field map, so I could quickly come over here, go back to our sync services, click on our active sync, and we'll just do it for the leads module real quick. Field mapping, edit, map more fields. Newsletter. Oh, we have a newsletter opt-in inside the CRM. Let's go ahead and create a new field inside of campaigns called the same. And now if I go, we'll want to hit initiate. And now if I go back to my segmentation and create a new segment, and we call it newsletter, just call it newsletter, and then newsletter opt-in is true, save. So just like that, I've created a segment. Everyone that's opted into the newsletter, and you could have more criteria in here. Maybe you have multiple newsletters you send out to different states. So depending on their state, if their newsletter is true, we want to mark it, send a newsletter out to California, New York. You could go ahead and simply add more fields. State is CA. But maybe it's spelled out in the CRM like California. This is why standardized ways of inputting data is very important. Some things I wanted to point out here. I have a whole video about criteria rules, but you have and or. If you're using and, both statements need to be true. If you're using or, only one of the statements needs to be true. So you'd want to be careful here. In this case, we'd always want to use and because it's for a newsletter segment. And state, so this would be like newsletter CA. And contains, if maybe there are records where people are involved with multiple states and they might have multiple states as an option in their record, you might want to use contains instead because is has to be exacted. The field has to match exactly how it is inside the CRM for it to populate in here. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of segments with zero contacts in it because this isn't inputted properly. So we can go ahead and save. And now, theoretically, if we had a bunch of leads that were in California and also opted into the newsletter, we would have a whole bunch of contacts here that we could later on send this newsletter out to via campaign or via workflow. So that's a brief rundown of segments and lists. Let's go ahead and dive into making our first campaign. I actually got ahead of myself there. Let's go ahead and look at how to do some topic assignment. So we're going to create a very basic workflow here, and it's going to be for assigning topics. So if we go to custom workflow, call it topic assignment. And for those of you that did choose to do topic management and create multiple topics, this little section right now is for you. So a quick way on entering a segment, and we can call this segment newsletter. Let's just pretend it's newsletter opt-in. So we'd go ahead and say existing and new contacts for the first time. And then we would go ahead and choose an action. And then down here, we should have assigned to a topic. Subscription management, here it is. And we configure this, and we have a newsletter topic. So obviously, everyone that's already opted into our newsletter in the CRM, they're going to be opted into this topic as well. And you also have other options here, which I'm not going to go into, but you could remove people from topics, move them to non-marketing, or unsubscribe them from all topics. So, and then we could go ahead and if we wanted to, we could add them to a list, which we talked about, So this would be creating a list, newsletter, topic, assignment. Maybe later on you could kind of create a workaround, I would say, because you can't really see who's opted into your topics or who's opted out, but you could get creative with lists to kind of create a way around that. And then lastly, we'll just create a quick little exit from this workflow. So now everyone coming into the segment newsletters is CA. And we'll just say newsletter, though, is now being assigned to the newsletter topic. And we've just added the list to kind of show you the example that I talked about earlier in list. And now we've created a brief topic assignment. Another one that's popular as well is using just subscription management. You can also come in here and edit this, and you can choose all of your topics. So in some cases, maybe you want them to receive everything. And by doing so, they're only going to be sent emails in the segments they're in anyways. So regardless if they're opted into all topics or not, it doesn't really matter, because when they go to unsubscribe or remove themselves from some topics, sure, they can see everything, but they're still only going to be receiving the content that they're segmented to. So another way, when they first come in, you could just apply every topic to every single contact or lead. And then from there, they can go ahead and choose to remove themselves if they only wanted to unsubscribe from certain content. So that's going to wrap it up for this topic assignment section. Now let's go ahead and jump into creating our first campaign. So for one-off campaigns, we're going to want to click on campaigns and then over to email campaigns. You can also set up SMS if you want to send a solo SMS campaign to a mailing list as well. So click on email campaigns. You can see we have some here. Things I want to point out before we get into it, you can always view, if you're working with a team, other people's campaigns here, or a campaign status, whether it's been a draft or scheduled. You can view those all here as well. Let's go ahead and create a campaign. And here you're going to see we have a ton of different options. We can send a standard regular email campaign. We can A/B test based on subject line, the body, and see which one does better, and then send that one out to the bulk. You got RSS campaigns, Zoho meeting, go to webinar, event, right? Like if you have Backstage set up, for example, you can integrate Backstage and pull in some of your event details into the campaign. You got e-commerce options and Zoho Forms, Zoho Survey. So let's go ahead. For this example, let's just take a regular campaign, because for the most part, these two right here are what most of us are going to be using. Create a campaign, and we'll just call this newsletter, and we're going to assign a topic, newsletter. So from here, we have our topic. It's been assigned to newsletter. If you don't see this, it's because you only have marketing, and that's okay. Unless you want to set up topics, you can just leave it as is, and you don't have to worry about it. We can edit the name of the campaign up here. We can add a subject line. So, October 8th, weekly newsletter. If you want to add a pre-header, this is what people will see before they open it. So you've got the context, the subject line, followed by a little gray bar. This is going to I can spell this up here before, or I should say after you open it. You can save that. You can also add emojis. You can include their first name with the merge tag up here. So if you wanted to personalize it, you can do contact's first name. So you can get creative with it. Next, we have the sender. You can go ahead and add your sender details here, whether it's a CRM owner, a custom field such as like a contact owner or the account rep. And you'd put in, it could autofill their name, or you could just go ahead and choose a sender name for a default email that's going to go to everyone. If you turn on reply tracking, I like to warn a lot of people, it's going to cause your message to look like a string of random numbers and letters from this sent from person. And I would not turn this on just because it's going to make your email kind of look like spam. But if you wanted to get reply tracking, you could go ahead and turn this on as well. In the settings, I covered this already, but you definitely want to make sure DMARC is set up, not just SPF and DKIM. And then lastly, you have your reply to options down here as well. And if they reply to the email, who it's going to be returned to. Next, we can go ahead and add recipients. So we can go ahead and choose our newsletter segment. And let's say we wanted to exclude contacts. So we have our newsletter, but we don't want it. We only want this going out to, let's say our leads. So let's go ahead and exclude all CRM contacts because we have our list. And, we don't have any campaigns set up yet. So I won't be able to, so we'll just choose this. And there we go. So all CRM contacts are now excluded, and it's going to our newsletter segment here, but we have no one in it, so it's not going to populate anything. And let's say our total recipients was not 0. Let's say it was something else. This goes back to assigning the topics. So let's go ahead and edit one more time, and we'll just save. It should refresh it. So now let's say we saw it was 0. Let's say it should have actually been 10. If you hit map, it's going to associate all of those people. And then if we clicked here, it might show the 10. So if you're ever wondering, hey, I should have more people in here. Well, maybe you didn't create that workflow we just set up to assign them to topics. So no one's populating in here because they haven't been assigned to any topics. Now, remember, if you didn't set up any topics yet and it's just on the default marketing, you have nothing to worry about here because this doesn't matter then. All right, and now let's go into the builder itself. So we've set up our subject line, we set up our senders, we've set up our segments or a list we're going to send it to. So with the builder itself, you can go ahead and create templates, which I briefly touched on in the beginning. You have some basic pre-designed, you have a pre-designed template. And then you have a basic template layout you can pick that Zoho's created. So by default, we can go with the blank, but if you kind of know the look and feel of what you're looking for, you can go ahead and choose one of these layouts as well. And we'll go back real quick and look at all the other options. We also have HTML code editor. This is a popular one, especially if you're coming from another platform and you have a bunch of templates already created. You can simply drag in the HTML code and have your beautiful looking newsletter ready to go within seconds. Plain text editor, this is going to look like a basic email. And then you can always import and upload HTML or look at one of the campaigns you've recently sent to clone one of those. But generally speaking, if it's recently sent and you're copying it, you would just use the clone feature at the beginning of this whole process. So let's go ahead and choose a basic template, and we'll take a blank template and look at some of the features with the builder here. So you got options to drag and drop in text, or you can just simply click on the text box and it'll pull it in to your builder template here. You can go ahead and choose the fonts, edit the headers, font styles, text, all of that. You can manage the padding over here on the left for the various block elements you're using. You can use images, text and images. You can add buttons, add columns, and within the columns, you can use a custom, or you can choose, I want text, picture, text. We hit done here. And we can even drag in an image within a column block. So there's lots of options to customize this and get it looking pretty. You can choose your whole elements, divide the column sizes up differently if you wanted to, add some background colors. You can add your social icons. You can create a footer. It's going to add the default footer. You can customize this to how you want it. Then you can go ahead and star it, and you can call it updated footer, or I haven't changed anything here. But then later when you come in, this will come across all of your different elements or all of your different templates you want to create. So you can quickly and just drag and drop in your footer using the bookmark if you created a custom header as well. You add spacers, you can add dividers in between elements. You can embed videos, dynamic content. So let's say a perfect one's an email signature. So let's say this is going out by the CRM owner and everyone's got a really cool email signature. Maybe it's just an image or maybe it's some HTML. But we can go ahead and choose, owner. I don't know if we can say account owner is, and then say it's Wayne. So if the account owner is Wayne, I could add some HTML here and create a nice block, and I could add my whole team, create all their email signatures. So I send one massive, newsletter email chain out to all of our contacts, and then whoever is the rep representing these contacts, they can go ahead and reach out directly from them. Him, so it's going to, or her, they're going to have their signature down there at the bottom. So dynamic contacts, super cool, is you can use fields to kind of sort through who you want to send it to or what it's going to display based on the fields in the CRM. You can add polls, attachments. You can throw in tables. You got some box text options as well. So kind of like a button, but not. And you've got ICS. So if you want to do a calendar invite, you can go ahead and send that here. And then lastly, you can go ahead and insert some custom HTML. Maybe you're just not getting the look and feel to what you're building with the builder and you want to add in some HTML, you can do that as well. So once everything's done, you can preview it and test it, and then we can just hit proceed. And generally speaking, this is your first email you're getting ready to send out, you can go ahead and you might have to wait a little bit before the sending options appear. So like right now there's no image, so let's edit this real quick. And we will just delete this whole block here. Now we'll proceed and add sender details. And since we're not mapped, it's not going to pop up. So I won't be able to, but the send, you can go ahead and send now, or you can send later. If it's a large list, you have options for bulk sending to break it out into batches, set a schedule for future dates. There's lots of different options when it comes to sending. All of it's pretty self-explanatory. But batches, if you have like say 10,000 contacts you're about to send it to, maybe sending it in a few batches so it's not all going out at once might be a better practice. And then lastly, if we come down here, we've got some advanced options so we can turn on tracking. If you're using Google Analytics, Wistia, you can disable, reply tracking is currently disabled, but we could go ahead and enable it once things are connected. Oftentimes we're going to want to create campaigns inside of the CRM. So when this goes out, it's going to create a record in the campaigns module. And then anyone that receives this email on their contact record under campaigns, you're going to be able to see their interactions with this email. They opened it, clicked on anything. You can apply scoring rules. So if I had some links within this email or just that they opened it, I could set up some scores, some response actions for follow-ups. So, if the email is open, I can go ahead and add them to a workflow or add them to a list. And then from there, in the workflow, I could create a task, or I could create a calendar invite if I wanted to add the event as a calendar. So that's campaigns in a nutshell. I flew through it really fast. If you want more in-depth breakthrough in our training course, I go through the builder in-depth. I think it's like almost an hour long just covering the builder itself. But now you have a general overview of campaigns. Let's go ahead and take a look at the workflow builder. Okay, so now that we have our campaign, we've gone over the builder. Let's go over one of the core features inside of Zoho Campaigns, and that is the workflow builder. This is going to be the tool that we use for creating various drip campaigns, putting different market qualifying leads through, a series of emails, doing scoring, doing all sorts of things, all of these automations, everything that we just want to set it and forget it, and then move them along their journey until they're ready to be qualified. Or maybe it's just some re-engagement or some promotions around a certain product, or, it's just information that you want to get out there. They can all be done in a drip. Maybe it's the same information that's not going to change over the course of the years, but depending on when someone purchases the product, you want them to start them on this info campaign where they receive email 1, 2 weeks later, email 2, et cetera, et cetera. Just is going to vary for every business, but I'm going to do you a quick run through of how to use this tool, and we're going to focus on the newsletter theme that we've been covering during this campaign. So if we go forward again, back to the automation, let's go ahead and create a workflow with the idea of we're going to send out 3 emails based on a newsletter follow-up. So we'll just choose a custom workflow, but they have, templates here for re-engagement, retention, e-commerce, like abandoned shopping cart's a common one that people might use. So we'll say newsletter follow-up. If we go here, we have our segment already, but we're going to choose a trigger. A trigger could be a form submission. It could be an entry on a list. So maybe any lead that comes into our CRM, we know that they're going to be added to that lead list. We could go ahead and drop that there. Or maybe we used a list at the end of a workflow, and that's the trigger to put them into this workflow. And in most cases, though, you can automatically send them to a workflow at the end, but there's different purposes for everything. You can do enter segment. This is the one we're going to be using now. A date field. So maybe on, X amount of days after the engagement has started, you want to trigger a series of emails to go out. Maybe it's an NPS survey. Maybe it's client satisfaction, email just to see how they're doing. You can go ahead and drop that. Or maybe it's a warranty expiration. You can go ahead and set the date field there and trigger a workflow. Use custom fields to populate the email. Based on an email action, maybe if they clicked on a certain link on a campaign you sent out, you want to send them through a series of workflows. Or field updates, another trigger, a trigger based on signs. You can set up an open trigger. And most common ones for e-commerce, the abandoned cart right here, or purchase follow-up. Or if they product-specific follow-up, you can set that all here to basically choose what's going to be your trigger to start this workflow. So we've chosen a segment, and we're going to set this up for our newsletter. And here you can also say hey, I've already sent all of these newsletter people some basic information already. So I only want, now that I'm setting this up, everyone that's now about to enter the segment to receive this, or maybe it's only the previous people. So now that we have set up, we can go ahead and look at some of these tools over here. So you have process tools, you have your merge tags. So maybe the flow of things, we'll use this here in a little bit. We've got a random split. So if we configure this 50-50, people are like, well, random split, what do I need this for? Well, if let's say this segment's got 10,000 people in it, one way you can split it, we've got, a wait time function over here. So we have, let's say 1 hour for 50%, but we're going to send the next 50% a day later. And maybe, that's a message, not a delay. So let's say wait time over here. And let's say this is 1 day. And even better, this is 7 days a week for both of these. We could even put a wait time at the beginning of this and say, I heard, Monday's the best day to send out content. So I'm going to start this Monday, regardless of when they entered this newsletter segment. We're going to wait 1 hour on Monday, And then 50% are going to receive this email on Monday. The other 50% are going to receive it on Tuesday. And I can kind of see how the journey goes for both of these and which one's doing better. And then later on, I can come in here and edit it. So already we're starting to build our web, kind of figure out what we want here. So now the merge tag, though, we can go ahead and pull these both into here because now we're going to start the same journey over here. So we'll move this up a little bit. And now let's go ahead and engagement. Let's choose our first action and let's send an email. So now that we have our email, we've got email 1. I'm not going to go into the create a message because it's exactly the same as the campaign that I just configured a second ago with you guys. One thing to notice though is you can go ahead and change these. So maybe this is email 1 of the campaign. And maybe you want to add a date and the workflow name that it's going through. So you can see it clearly inside of the CRM and later on in reporting. You can go ahead and based on the response, did they delivered, which is basically was it sent, was it opened, was it skipped? We can go ahead and choose various actions here. And then from here, we can go ahead and based if it was delivered, put them down a path, open, put them down a path, skipped, put them down a path. I oftentimes, though, like to do this on action or later on. You can go ahead and add scores, for example, if they opened or if they didn't open, you could subtract a score and they could all continue down the same path. You can add some wait times, add some wait conditions, add them to a list, which we covered earlier. You exit the workflow. There's so much you can do with this workflow builder, and you really can get creative to maximize, so let's say we had our action up here, but like for the process, we had email activity. So this is more along the lines of what I like to do is I like to wait, set the wait time in between messages, or maybe not. Maybe if they click on something, I want them to interact faster. So I would just have delivered and clicked on a specific link, but there's no link in there. Delivered, it's going to go here, but there's going to be like a wait time for, let's say, 7 days. And then based on their action, maybe we have more emails below. So I can configure this on this action, but now I have a wait time in between these. So I've got my delivered, it's going to wait, let's say 2 days, and then based on their email action, they're going to receive the next email, or they're going to receive a different email if they've clicked on it because they're more engaged. I want to send a different message, so on and so on. This looks a little bit messy, but you can really do a lot with these workflows. Like just for this newsletter alone, we have 50% going in. And then looking here, this would be message 1, like, hey, thanks for joining the club, yada, yada, yada. We hope you find our newsletter useful. This one, next email down the chain could be like, hey, here's some helpful links or other content that we do. Would you like to opt into this if they're just, on this one newsletter, this one product thread? So there's just a lot you can do with workflows. One last thing I want to point out, you can also create task and push data to the CRM based on the interactions, or create a task for an employee. Another thing I want to point out that's often overlooked, this coggle up here is actually really important. It allows you to set exit criteria. So that was kind of like the list that we talked about earlier. Like you can use a list as an exit criteria. So if they've already been in the list newsletter, which we don't want this one, but if they've already been in this, we don't want them receiving this going through this email chain. Or you can go ahead and for contacts who have not met the workflow's trigger conditions, you can go ahead and still keep them in the workflow. Maybe they were in it and now they're not because they don't meet the conditions. Maybe they were qualified initially, but there's 10 emails that are going to take 3 months to receive, and you don't want them in here anymore if they don't meet that criteria. Obviously, you should maybe want to set that as an exit criteria as well. But maybe you don't want to remove them and you want them to continue on their journey even though they don't meet the criteria. You can set that here. It is by default. And then you can also enable re-enrollment of contacts into the workflow. They didn't meet the criteria for the segment and then they did, and they've re-entered the segment. They can also go ahead and re-enter the workflow onto the segment. So you can go ahead and configure that down here as well. But I always find it a best practice to have some sort of exit criteria, usually a list, generally speaking, just because so many times your sync's not working properly. You set up this segment, something's buggy. You go ahead and you turn it off and you turn it back on. And the next thing you know, you have 2,000 people that have already received these emails months ago, receiving all of these same emails again. It just doesn't look very professional. By adding a list at the end of the workflow, it prevents these people from going through the same workflow again, especially if it's one that you don't want them to re-enter. So that's workflows in a nutshell. Let's go ahead and dive into our last segment here. For those of you that aren't on Zoho Campaigns yet and looking to migrate to Zoho Campaigns, I'm going to go over a few best practices. All right, a few migration tips that I'm just going to throw out there. If you're coming from another platform, let's say you're on HubSpot or Salesforce or MailChimp and you're moving to Zoho. First thing you need to ask yourself is, do I want Zoho Campaigns or do I want Zoho Marketing Automation? Most of us are on Zoho 1, so most of us have both options available to us. Those of us that aren't on Zoho 1, just looking for a marketing platform, if you're only right now needing to use the leads and contacts module or list, marketing automation is probably the platform I'd go to because there's more tools built in. But if you need account-based marketing, marketing automation will have this feature soon, but it doesn't yet. So you'd probably still want to use Zoho Campaigns. In most cases, I think right now, from what I've heard, Zoho Campaigns has more features in it. Marketing automation has the updated UI, and the workflow builder is much nicer. However, I hear Campaigns is getting these features, and eventually the features inside of Zoho Campaigns and marketing automation will be close. And if you ever want to move from Campaigns to marketing automation, somewhere in the near future, there's going to be a migration option, and you can just move from one platform to the other pretty seamlessly. When that's going to happen, though, we don't have any information on that yet. So I hope that answers the argument between which one do I choose, Zoho Campaigns is Zoho Marketing Automation. The next thing I want to cover is a lot of times when businesses and organizations are moving from, say, MailChimp to another platform, there's been a delay in your marketing material going out. This delay, especially if you have a large list, I mean, every single week emails are going to bounce. It's inevitable. People change their jobs, kill their domains, whatever. Emails are going to bounce. If you wait a few months and you have a very large list, this can lead to a very large bounce list. You do not want this to happen. It's going to get you in trouble with Zoho first off, and it's going to ruin your domain potentially. So one tool I highly recommend is clearout.io. There's other email other email verification tools out there. We've got an article on how to do this process and a video on our website, but great tool, highly recommend it. And I go in depth on how to apply this to your segments and everything inside of CRM and Zoho Campaigns. The next thing I'm going to recommend is import things. If you have Zoho 1, you have the CRM, start everything, come up with what fields you want to segment by inside of the CRM, and pull in as much data from MailChimp or these other platforms that you're going to, and do your import into the CRM, and maybe even apply a couple extra fields saying it is a MailChimp import or whichever platform you're coming from, Constant Contact, and also do the clear out fields. Let's say email verification is valid or invalid. And then when you create your segmentations later on, you can kind of warm up your system, do some test everything a few times, use the bookmark features, use the templates. It's going to make your life a lot easier. So pretty brief, pretty quick, but it's just a few extra steps that will make your experience of migrating to Campaigns or marketing automation much more enjoyable. Anyways, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button below, and we'll see you on next month's product tutorial.